Yeah.
So, because the major hang-up, well, one, is you got all the restrictions on the property and stuff like
Yes.
this, and then at one time, the county was asking like 30, 40 grand an acre.
Right,
It's like, no one's gonna buy that with all these restrictions.
right.
And then the other hang-up is there was a contract, a 50-year contract from 2002 to 2052 between the township and the city, so your
Yes.
tax at state levels,
I
which
remember.
I was able to work that out and
Yeah.
broke it 30 years early. you know,
Good.
Without a penalty to us.
That's
So,
nice.
slight penalty to the county, but they'll make more money off selling the land anyways. So,
Yes.
all the county commissioners like me right now. 'Cause
I like how you said right now.
I've only brought them two major deals, and the major deals were, listen, this makes it easier for business people to make money, it makes more money for the township, and it makes more money for the county. Now you decide, yes or no,
Yeah.
which way do you want to go?
Right.
So I'm nonpartisan right now.
Yeah, good.
All righty. It is 6:01. I'll call the meeting tonight to order for the Dalton Township Planning Commission work session. Roll call first. Go over here, Dave. I am here. Jesse is excused. Nick?
Here.
Lee? Here. John?
Here.
Casey?
Here.
And Todd.
Here.
All right. Approval of the, nothing to add tonight to the agenda?
No.
Approval of the agenda for tonight, and we'll do public comment.
Motion to approve the agenda?
Or, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, move on to public comment. Get up to 3 minutes to state if anyone would like to. All right, I will open public comment up at 6:03.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you're all actually putting your time here. A lot of evenings that you might want to be doing something else. Anyhow, I'm here with my bride, former English teacher, so she will keep me abreast of anything that's not said quite right. And Stephen Kerr and I had talked, and he had suggested that I come here. My name is Eric Odemark, and this is my wife, Mary. And we've been here about 10 years, and had kind of an up and down thing with the zoning system here. Not always happy with it. And then they've made some improvements that we thought made good sense. And we recently looked into just adding an addition on the front of our house. And several years ago, when we brought that up, Lorraine Grabinski looked at it and says, I can approve it right now. You have a 32-foot deck going out towards the lake, which is 6 to 8 feet above ground, and that is your established setback by the zoning ordinance. Well, we had something else going on at that time, so we didn't pursue that. 2 years later, I'm trying to get contractors out to give us a bid on it, because they may tell me it's going to be $300,000, so I'm going to say, well, forget that. Don't know, and they said, before you go any further, you might want to go get a permit. And then I could get an architect, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, I wasn't pleased with that, but it makes some sense. So anyhow, looking at your zoning ordinances, I really don't know how to, I guess I could cite the section to you in case you want to look it up. 9.5, and it's a minimum required principal building setbacks. And there's kind of two sections in there. And when I look at the section A, it talks about if I want to build an addition, I can't go beyond the eaves of my adjacent properties, okay? However, if there are a bunch of current buildings in there that are less than that setback, then you look at all the things within 200 feet and take the average. That made some sense. But then I go into another section, dealing with decks and patios. And it talks about on a waterfront lot, which I'm on, so it'll be 4.53, section E primarily, and, well, actually should be C and E, where if your deck is above 8 inches above the ground, then that becomes part of your principal building setback, okay? So you visualize a 32-foot deck out in front of you that's been there for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. And that Lorraine had said that is my setback. So I can build anything out to that spot. Now, I didn't see anything else in the zoning ordinance that would contradict that, other than that it's poorly written. And I believe Steve had brought that up with your council, and he kind of felt the same way. And, you know, we had talked about it, and said you really need to have a uniform way of doing this, because I just happen to have a small house on one side of me, and the houses on the right of me all would be in line with where I want to put on the addition. So because I'm stuck with a small house next to me, I can't build on. And yet, you go down another house within 200 feet, they're way out. But I can't go forward because of that little small house. It doesn't seem right. And I suspect if you went around the township, which I don't know really well, you're gonna find other examples of that. So my kind of suggestion to all of you, just to think about, is a way to say, let's say that all the houses are 50 feet back from the waterfront. Anybody should be able to then build within 50 feet. And if you're not, I guess then you go through that whole appeal process and say, well, we might give you a variance, and you can do it. But there's other language too that also talks about, within that deck section, they use on a waterfront lot, a porch, terrace, deck, or similar improvement can be added, but it doesn't define what similar improvement is. And I believe you'll go around the lake and you'll find some places where people put on a porch with a roof and a floor in it. And then they add walls and windows. And then they insulate it. Then it becomes another room. So what I'm talking about, I guess I could say, if I added just a deck and a roof, and then came back as well, just to put windows in it and insulate it, and I got my room. So it doesn't define what similar improvement means. And we all perhaps have a different version of what we think it means. So that's just something to mull over. I didn't really think it would be necessary to have to file an appeal based on the language that's in the documents. And Steve has been taking a pretty tight look at it. And I didn't catch how long he's been doing the job. Lorraine didn't have any problem with it, and I don't want to say, well, she did and he didn't. But if the language was clarified, I think that any person taking over his job when he retires 50 years from now would be able to understand the language, and you have consistency. Everybody that would come in and would apply for a building addition would say, well, this is pretty clear. And you wouldn't have to even get your attorneys involved unless the people just work really nice. And so that's kind of what I wanted to say. I don't know if my bride has anything she wants to add. Okay, well, thank you.
Where do you guys live at? What's the?
Right on North Lake on Mueller Road. In fact, I kind of wanted Steve, hey, come on out to the house and look at our neighbors. We got a house that's 45 feet out towards the lake. And, take a look at it. You'll have a better feel for the neighborhood. But I think he uses aerial photographs or drones or something, and he could tell what the neighborhood is like. But I really think I shouldn't have to go through an appeal if this was all uniformly understood. And so whatever you guys can do on your planning commission to clarify that would be great.
So, thanks.
We use possum cams, you know, so we just let them loose and amazing things we are, just kind of as a backstory, we're looking at this and bringing things forward like this helps us to identify some things we need to clarify. We're trying to shrink it and make it more readable and doable, and then restrictions are clearly defined as well as what you're allowed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly what you're bringing forward has been part of, one of the things that the lake areas in particular have had this, because interpretation has been wildly, through the course of lakes, since the beginning of Rocks and Water, has pretty much been that way. So we appreciate your bringing this forward to us. Steve included some things for us tonight to kind of look at this, and if everyone had an opportunity. Let's see, first I will close the public comment at 6:10. All right, and then to review, we have you want to just run through the agenda and then
Yeah, I
it's
think
down in the, it's down
it's
in
number
the.
3
yeah.
and I'm gonna down
All
there.
right. You'll see we have that in our agenda tonight as part of the conversation. So we're going to go through this and take care of some business first, and we'll get to that part.
Appreciate that.
We may ask you for some more input, which might help us clarify how we might be able to make this a more breathable document for you. First thing we have tonight is the special use for the addition of beer, wine, and spirits at the 4207 Whitehall Road at the ice cream. It's in the packet.
And there's also what
Yeah.
was sitting on the desk.
Yeah, I think the letter says it all.
Yep, the letter's
Yeah.
pretty clear.
That, yeah. Sounds like it's really in preparation for a food truck operation.
Yeah, he wants to cater off-site in
Yeah.
order to serve beer and wine at private parties off-site.
Mhm.
To get his liquor license, he has to have a brick and mortar location. So,
I know at one time he was looking at bringing in the food trucks to that location too. Is that something he would do on that location too, or more the off-site?
it'd be more off-site.
Okay.
The food trucks he brings to that location are from other areas, and I've never seen one of them that has a liquor license.
That's what I was wondering if
So,
it was.
yeah, he seems to not attract people who got liquor licenses already.
So I think you would need this approval wouldn't be for on-site consumption.
Right, you need then like another
Yes.
permit from the state for that to, so when he
Yeah.
takes his food truck somewhere, he has to get a permit for that location where he is, and he has to have this permit first before he can apply for that. The liquor commission is awful. Is this one of these, so I know when we were getting our liquor license for the campground, the township can only have a certain number of this type of liquor license. That's for on-site consumption, right? This is not this kind of license?
I'm not sure
Okay,
what that is.
okay.
In his letter, he talked about having a small cooler and a partial stock of beer, wine there.
Yeah.
It almost sounded like the kids could have ice cream, Dad could have a beer.
They can't though, so
They
he
didn't buy
complied.
it, but not consume it there.
Right,
Yeah.
they have to take it off his
Okay.
premises,
Okay.
that's what's, there's so many different licenses, but the township can only have a certain number of the on-site ones. So I don't know, I don't think this affects it, but
Yeah.
So what exactly are we approving?
It would just be a special land use for him to be selling beer, wine, and liquor. Since he's zone C1, a special land use permit is required. In C2, across the street to the south, the special land use is not required.
Okay.
He says food trucks are very popular, or are very popular with catering, weddings. I can't imagine where you would get married, where there'd be a food truck.
well, that's all the rage
Is
now.
it?
Yeah.
I haven't been to a wedding in a long time.
You mean all your friends have married already?
Yeah, that seems to be what people are leaning towards now, instead of having a catering company and having it at a place, you just have a couple food trucks. It's cool nowadays. I don't know, I've been married
Less
a long time.
expensive, I'm sure, than the country club.
Yes, I'm sure.
Okay.
Do we need to look into the volume of certain permits that are allowed in an area?
I'm gonna look and see, because I know the township can only have 5 or something, and they have one left, I think, for, But I think that's for like an on premises.
Like a restaurant.
Right, because we got the fourth one, I think, and there's a fifth, I think we get 5. Each township or something is allotted a certain number. But I really think that's for consumption on premises. So I think this type of license, the township can give out an infinite number of them. Because the state will approve it and, yeah, because this is more like a gas station. But I'd hate to approve them for something that the state's like, oh, you already have enough in your township, and then we didn't catch it, so.
Or it's the last one, there is no more opportunity for a restaurant or.
Yes,
something
that's,
like
exactly, that's
You
true.
sell 6 beers all year, you actually,
That's very true, and then we don't have one for a restaurant that would bring money into the township instead of out.
other than that, it's gonna be.
Well, is that something we need to have clarified then? We're gonna ask, see if we have, if that is a finite number or if it is is that something we need clarified?
I'll ask Roger, he knows. He's the one that, we just did ours like 6 months ago, so he'll remember all of it.
I would, you know, that sounds, the way you're describing it, I would hate to think we'd have a finite number of something like we're trying to approve. That would seem pretty.
Right.
Any business plan would have that opportunity, so but again, if you could find out.
Okay, well, did you, when Duck Creek went, did it go in front of the board? Do you remember approving a liquor license?
I'm not sure it went in front of the full board.
Okay. You don't remember it?
I don't remember it either.
Okay. He'll remember, he's got all the
It'll be
details.
worth looking at, if you wanna reach out to Steve.
I
figure
felt
out
like
if
we
have a
had-
finite number.
Yeah.
I felt like we had to go in front of the board because there was a finite number and it was more important than the planning commission, but I'll ask him. I forgot about this. I meant to
That's
ask him when I read
gotta
my packet, but he wasn't home.
I would think that that would change based upon population density and stuff. I'd be surprised if they only limited a number per township. That can't be.
It has to be, I assume it's population based.
That could be an excuse, but.
The state liquor commission has a lot of those.
Right.
You can't do anything fun in Michigan. No swim up bars, no, nothing fun. All these campgrounds down in Florida and Louisiana. Everybody's like, why don't you build that? Because we can't. The state of Michigan says, no, no, no. I'll know by next
Unless
meeting.
you're on a tribal reservation.
Oh, well, of course, then you can, whatever.
All right, we move on to the draft amendments for lot coverage, transportation terminals, and site plan reviews. And those again are gonna be, we're having a public hearing for those, correct?
No, these are the approval of the draft amendments. These encompass everything we've been talking about November and December. Most things that we've been talking about.
Yeah, that's in our meeting packet.
Those all reflect what we spoke about.
Yeah, I don't think there's,
I think it's just cleaning up terminology
Yeah.
and making some adjustments to the administratively approved site plans.
it is 10% from 5.
Minor changes do not require a fee.
Like example language for this,
For,
for this, the amendment for all of this?
so the first ordinance, I don't have any example language. Those were just changes that we discussed previously.
Oh, I see.
There we go. And I couldn't find them, that's what I was losing my mind here.
Oh, yeah, they're in the back in new business.
Yes. Like, wait a minute, I know what we're
We
talking
had a
about.
large communications section this month.
Yes, all right, gotcha. All right, yeah, these, yeah, it's all pretty much the, this next, it's the cleaning up of the language. Yeah, so I think the draft amendment for lot coverage, transportation terminals, and site plan reviews are the ones, are all pretty much, those are already in the packet, correct?
Correct.
And that's just a matter of, we have to go.
Yeah, they're
through
ways
those.
of.
Yeah, go to the back there and we'll go through those. So the one that probably needs the most attention then would be that the mobile food vendors.
Yes. That's when there are some sample,
Way in the back.
a couple sample ordinances. One is from the city of Ludington, and the other is from Marquette Township. Right by Ludington. The Ludington is, it's a zoning ordinance, and Marquette has a general law ordinance. But that ordinance puts the zoning administrator in charge of administering it.
So this is coming up because there's nothing in the ordinance right now that either approves or denies it.
Correct.
And you want to put language into specifically permit it.
Correct.
Okay.
That's just
Because
something,
I'm like,
yeah, this is something Jeff and I have
Xbox
been working on.
has food trucks all the time. Is it not allowed? But
So-
it's not allowed. It's.
I would say since it's not allowed, and they're not setting up shop permanently, I wouldn't enforce anything.
Okay.
But I was looking through Icebox's file earlier and actually found a temporary use permit for food trucks.
Oh.
So it's one of those things where you could allow it as a temporary special use, as a seasonal use or
Mhm.
something like that. So it would be a good idea to have
Some language.
some language
Okay.
saying it's allowed for this, and if it's any longer than this time period, then you should get a special use.
Okay.
As it is now, it's a little bit in the lurch, because you could find him in violation of something or not, depending on what you want to do, because we don't have an ordinance on it. And so we compared a number of different places on ordinances, and this one came out, fairly lenient or on the side of food trucks. Probably the biggest things to look at would be like the numbers, because we just threw some numbers at it. That would seem reasonable, like 6 days per month for the one, so which would cover 2 long weekends. But is that enough? That's up to you guys.
This came up during the regular board meeting, didn't it?
while back?
They did.
Something up about that.
Yeah, quite a while ago. This would be last fall.
Yeah, very, very beginning.
And we want to try to get something in place this spring.
So thinking that a mobile food vendor may operate on the same parcel without a permit for up to and including 3 consecutive days, but not exceeding 6 days per month.
I think 6 might be too little. I know some of the people at Icebox, they would have them there Friday and Saturday, like every day, every weekend,
That's
so
what I
that'd be 8 days.
Yeah, that's what I
so-
was thinking, like weekends, if you go
Yeah,
Friday, Saturday, or Friday, Saturday, Sunday, even if someone wanted, I don't know, is restricting it, is there any reason to restrict it? I mean, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I'd let the business, if you open up and there's no business, it's not anything, we're not restricting them, I'd hate to,
Market side.
you know, I mean, to me, it makes almost
Well, 'cause
sense to give them the opportunity rather than start out limiting it, rather than
well, in
say,
the
well, we
same
don't-
line, it says that they can't be there for more than 30 days, so.
Yeah. And that's set on the first page also.
So maybe the 30 days would be enough. I mean, you're not gonna, yeah, you're right, you're not gonna have a food truck sitting there making no business and still staying there, or they're gonna move on.
Or at least an operation, yeah, because it's at Icebox's place, since that's what we're talking about. If they want to open it up, I mean, if it's just sitting there, it's just parked, it's not open, so it's,
Right, then it's just a car,
it
right?
should, then it's
Yeah.
just sitting there, so it's just parked.
Usually it's the trash receptacles and things
Trucks
that,
there.
Yes, yep.
That's an area.
There's enough good points in these submittals, Steve, that I could, if you want, condense it down to one document, or?
Oh,
do you want
we
to-
are, so because we have the ordinance number 2022-02. Is the other pieces, like from Ludington and stuff, are references. We also had more, but Ludington had some good ones in that area, so Steve included those. But ordinance 2022-2 is the one that Steve has put together. I put together notes that seemed popular, that it addressed issues in different places,
Yeah.
and then he wrote this up.
so we could, I mean, really, the 30 days, I don't think that's too limiting. I think 30 days, you could do 30 days, and there's no reason you couldn't then approve them for another 30 days, right?
Correct.
That's
As long as
another
they've
question.
Shown good cause and they're not violating
You know,
their
they've
current
shown
ones,
good
yeah.
intents, and
Right, so they could be approved for another 30 days, and that's included in here as once. And that's another one of the limitations that would make sense for you guys to address. Would it make sense for them to have a potential for one more re-up essentially per year? Or should it be more, or should it exist for the 30 days?
What are they doing like in the city of Muskegon, with some of the work that they have there?
The city of Muskegon is struggling to figure it out. Like up by the, well, you know, if you get up in Norton Shores, where they have the airport, and they only have some of them going in there. Yeah, they've, like Norton Shores has struggled with putting that together, and last time I checked, which was a few months ago, they still didn't technically have an ordinance in place, which is interesting.
But if they're not violating, what's the point of limiting them at all? Like, what's the point of making them go through all the applying for a special, you know, like, all of that, if they're not violating the other aspects of this, and it's profitable for them to be in a place for 90 days, what's the point of having all the limitations?
I'm wondering about just the other side of that, the tax that would come from that into wherever for providing fire safety, all those things, they're not contributing to that, they're freeloading on the opportunity to set up a park, which I think is great within reason.
But at the same token, the property owner is providing all those things, so he's paying his property taxes and stuff,
Sure.
for the fire service, so.
You're pretty much renting the space. I guess that works just kind of like a
The
trash
way,
store.
so
So I noticed in the Dalton Township ordinance, it doesn't, the proposed one, it doesn't say anything about the Luddington one where it's talking about liquid waste or grease.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Don't you think we probably should put that in?
well, there's a lot of points in the Luddington that I like, that I think maybe we could add. There's one about they provide their own trash receptacle.
Oh, that's in there.
For their customers.
Yeah, that's letter F in the Dalton Township one.
Yeah, we got that in there. I had the liquid waste included as a line in some of my notes for being included in here. And Steve essentially got it down, which is completely fine, because it would be illegal anyways, because you'd be in
Gotcha.
violation.
Okay, good.
I mean, it could be included in there, kind of as a double, you know? Because we do have some sewer and whatnot here, not a ton. A little along M120, along Whitehall Road, major financial trouble, and then along
I'm trying to think
River
of
Road.
it.
Wouldn't if we put it in the lakes, wouldn't it bring a lot, well, I'm just kidding.
Be a little sludgy at the bottom, but you know, whatever.
I would think that would probably, any business would know that.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, but I don't know if it's worth having in here just to state as part of receptacles and your waste would need to be removed or taken off site or.
Because they probably, I would imagine, I remember looking at this, because a friend of mine was going to do a food truck. And you have to get a license, I think, anyway, they like to have a food license. So you're going to get checked by them.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, really though, like, you're gonna dump your stuff out there, and, I don't really know anybody. No.
Most likely you're dealing with an edge case.
Yeah, yeah,
It'd be unlikely that it was a major theme.
yeah.
Not having it in here and someone doing it, certainly the fact that we don't have it in here would not be for them to go, well, it's not in the
Right.
ordinance. I mean, that would, I think we would be covered at that point.
Then enforcement would probably just be carried out by the county. So, but we could, I mean, it could be included in here so that if someone was doing it, was just dumping the waste into
Emptying
the
the
sewer.
fryers out the back door.
Right, then the township could pursue it at that point if it's in here, but.
Thoughts?
I think with respect to how many days, I'm not really, I don't think every day during the summer's too many, but I think as a customer that, or as an operator, you want to set some expectation to your clientele, what days you're there. You know, like, let's go up and grab tacos. Well, they're not there till, you know, Friday or Saturday. Or, it seems like the summer makes a lot of sense, though, if they want to go 7 days.
So,
I would
did
not.
anybody talk to the city of Whitehall? Because they have that food
Yeah.
truck right on Colby that's there all the time.
I messaged a bunch of places and talked to a number. Whitehall is running it under a solicitor's license
Oh,
that they
okay.
have,
Okay.
Specifically, so.
But they don't seem to have any trouble with that same food truck being there every day. They're there in the winter and everything.
Yeah,
So,
with it just sitting there. And we discussed before, because some people had asked about that, potentially having like a food truck park where they're permanently at.
mhm.
And because in here we're adjusting the definition of restaurant as well, we could treat it as a restaurant, which is already covered in C1, C2, if someone wanted to just be in a permanent location. So we think we're covered there already, and don't
Okay.
need anything more. Could just come to you for a site review under a similar use to restaurant.
The old Clark gas station on Henry Street, there's now a taco truck under the canopy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And lots of business.
Yeah.
The parking aspects, people pulling in, it's the same kind of thing as a regular business. They have to manage things, the trash receptacle, and honestly, I watched it kind of just to see what I pulled up in the stuff, or across the street there, just to see what was going on there. Watch the flow of traffic in and out. And they do get quite a bit of business once they're open. And then they have the process of going and taking the trash. I don't know where they take it to, that would be the question. That's between the lights around there at times.
You ever see it there, we're at, I don't work out, I used to work on Henry Street too, I see them on there all the time, but I don't work.
So I mean, it does seem, and I don't know what permits they're required to pull, or if it's, you know, far as this, but it seems to me, I don't know if we're at the point where we can really start out real heavily restricting, I think, number of days and what have you. I'd be open to, you know, I don't know if we say anything about consecutive days, or if we say total number of days. Is it best to get into that?
How much of a special land use permit, if somebody were to come in and go, okay, I want to park at, you know,
Yeah, it's
Tasty Corner down
$50.
here. So $50, they could do a 30-day permit down at Tasty Corner and camp out there.
I think that'd be probably the better way to go than trying to say consecutive days or number of days a month. Like, I mean, obviously, 30 days a month is, but, yeah, I don't know, probably, at least then, you can kind of see if anybody even took you up on it.
So the thought behind the day limitation would be to not have to get a permit?
Yeah.
So if they wanted to go, say, talk to Chris Moore about food trucks, how they operate, while he was in my office, and he was saying a lot of times, most of us bounce around from one spot to the next and won't be there very long.
So it's to say, if you're
So-
going to do over this many days, then you would need a permit? Is that kind of what?
That's the intent of how I'm writing it.
If you guys
To
are,
allow
if you're
for
sliding the
flexibility
days
there.
to be more open, which I think is a good direction, I mean, would you think it would make sense to go as extreme as up to 30 days? You're fine, do
Right.
you want something beyond 30 days would be a special temporary use?
It's reasonable.
I'd be inclined to go like 60 days before they need a special land use permit. Because that would give them like most of the summer, I guess, and if they want to be there more than that.
We could also expand the special use to 60 days from 30.
When you started saying that case, you goes, okay, you get 14 freebie days, like, you get 2 weeks. You want to camp out at Duck Creek, and you're 2 weeks there. If you want to stay there longer than that, then come in and get a special use for it. It's gonna cost you $50.
Right.
And then that'll
Yeah.
get you for 60 more days, or you go to 90 days, 3 months to hit out the rest of the summer. If you think you've got a jackpot or a gold mine there after 2 weeks.
You don't stay if you don't make it, you know, you're not gonna, it seems to be giving them the opportunity to do the business. I think that we warrant that opportunity for them, so I think that makes sense. Like the 14 sounds reasonable.
I think it just helps us keep a tab about what's going on around the township. We got a new food truck that wants to be there for 30 days more. It's gonna be at this location.
So are we looking to use this verbiage of up to including 14 days, or not exceeding, or?
I'd say not to exceed 14 days.
Not exceeding 14 days.
Yeah, they go 14 consecutive days.
Yeah, would it be consecutive or would it be just 14 days? Like what if they came, you know, like 4 days in May and then like 7 days in June, like, what's your intent? What, are
I
you
would say
talking 14 consecutive?
days is
Okay.
how I would say.
I don't think any food truck, most, like you said, most food
Yeah.
trucks are there maybe 2 days. They'll do Friday night, they'll do all day Saturday, and then they're done. So I don't think anybody would ever get near 14 consecutive days unless they planned on being there a really long time.
Well, if you adjusted it to be something like, right now it's right up to 6 a month, but if you adjusted it to be something like 14 a month,
Yeah,
that allows them to hit every week, every 3-day weekend, every weekend
Yeah.
for as long as they want, and to never come to the township for permissions, anything, they can just do it.
Again, why limit it? Like, I understand everybody's concerns about everything, but if they hit whatever arbitrary number that we put it in, and they come to us and say, hey, I want to extend it, as long as they're not violating any of the other aspects of this, we're probably going to approve it. So what's the point of, as long as they're not violating anything?
well, because if we give them enough freebie, maybe we won't ever see them in here even getting a permit.
That's what I mean, if you
Then it'll
set it
be
at like
better.
90 days or something, and it's just not like an annual operation, as long as they're not violating anything. If they're gonna be there 90 days or more, and they have to come, and that's a long time, that would be a very unique circumstance. But if we set it at 14 days, who knows? Probably nobody's even gonna come in for 14 days, but if they did, as long as they're not violating anything else, we're covered. So what's the point? You know what I mean?
Who would oversee their operation, the proper use of our requirements? Like, what my biggest hang-up would be where the former Mexican restaurant used to be, and they go in there and the traffic, and somebody's gonna get whacked on M120 and Middle Lake Road, or across the street from the park. You know, those are my hang-ups, more of, you know, how it's operated, not so much the days, but who would oversee that? You know, the police department gets a complaint, you know, or I can see some little kid getting run over, crossing back from the park to John's Market where they might park, you know, that's where I'm at, is just where, how arbitrary do they, what are their requirements? Maybe they should be set back from so many feet from a US highway or a state highway, those sorts of things.
It's true, because if we're looking to approve a restaurant, we're reading a full plan, site plan and
Yeah.
everything, and we're looking at what MDOT says about it, we're looking at what the road commission says about it, and this, we're not looking at anything. We're like, oh, park your restaurant there, that's a very good point.
That's the only thing, I could see that happening. I live in that area, I see the fireworks once a year, this, you know, madhouse of people.
Yeah.
I get that, that'd be a great time to be there, but, you know, it's Taco Thursday, and they're there 3 days a week, or maybe they're there all week. I don't know the township that well to think of some obvious choices of where they might be. Maybe the ice cream place on 120 that reopened, and you know, there's plenty of spaces, but I would just like to encourage these operators to keep it safe, because these are, you know, families, and on 120 people, you know, Middle Lake Road, people fly, you know, everybody speeds, I know all our side roads, things like that.
We could put in language, I see your concern, and I think that's where a special land use would come in helpful. If it's a site that doesn't have an established parking lot, because if you were to put it in Family Farm and Homes parking lot, that's a relatively safe
Yeah.
location.
Right.
But if you were to
That's
put
great.
it at the old Las Fuegos, that's where you might need some site review, and there's no,
Yeah,
There's no defined parking.
there's no defined parking,
Yeah.
there's really no defined entry and exit points anymore.
Yeah, we could be creating a big traffic nuisance without meaning to.
And just as reading here in the Pure Marquette ordinance, C, I'm just looking at verbiage and it says more than one unit, but we can look at that. But if you look at the end of that sentence, it says, and meet zoning district setback regulations.
like the idea of a food truck park, but then maybe maybe that's not fair to people on the other side of the township.
Yeah.
They have to drive, you know, 8 miles or whatever.
I don't think that's going very well in Norton Shores either, because they're not there set hours, and sometimes they're not getting really enough clients or enough people to support when they're all there at the same time. They don't like competing, it's kind of been a disaster so far. So-
Yeah, I think it's another good example of why central planning doesn't work.
Food truck's kind of like a one-man kind of thing, like you sit up here and there's nobody else around you, that's.
I will bet we all had a specific parcel of property in mind, and we set up business there on it. It'll work or it won't work. And you know what, the problem is we need to have it so it'll work on any parcel based on what we put into action.
Yeah.
And I think that setback is a key thing. I think that's
Like the ball field at the gun club back in there, but again, who's gonna see it? That'd be pretty limited. I think it makes sense if I'm an operator to have it more than a commercial area, but on the other hand, you know, I don't wanna be fair to a hamburger stand either, like at the park, or you know, some other local restaurant.
And they do offer in here under D, under the one that was proposed here, is mobile food vendors may operate without a permit as part of a private event that is hosted by a residential use but is not open to the public. So you would have the opportunity for someone to do, like you were saying, if you were to do it on something along that. I think we're talking about the general person who's gonna bring in a truck,
Right.
set it up and open up, hang the shingle outside, serving spaghetti and meatballs or whatever they're doing. Being able to do that.
Elephant ears.
Yeah, you know, safely and,
Yeah.
This is interesting, that same line you were reading, it says, without a permit as part of a private event that is hosted by a residential use. So a very common place for food trucks is the Michelin Lodge, because they don't have catering there. But that would not be a residential use, it would be a commercial use, it's like hosting weddings. I don't know if there's anywhere in the township here that hosts weddings, but would that
FOP.
preclude them from using a food truck without a
No.
permit?
Because the,
Because of the time frame.
because it's allowed the commercial, industrial, and approved non-residential uses.
Okay,
Yep.
okay,
Yeah, we added in that section to make sure that,
gotcha.
people, if they're hosting a grad
Somewhere.
party or something like
People
that, would
would
be
see
able
it,
to have.
it's set back.
Okay,
It's got the parking. People in the park would see it.
So I feel like we're okay with it coming. We're concerned
Oh,
about
yeah.
the safety and setbacks or parking lots or I think some verbiage in there.
Trash and all the operating stuff.
well, and why can't, in the city, why can't you, why would you use one as a drive-through service, and why is Ludington specifically not allowing it? Like,
They probably ran into a specific issue, I assume.
how is the window low enough on a
I've
food truck to
seen
drive through?
like, they'll set up like little coffee shops in trailers,
Yeah, the
put them in like
trailers.
shopping center parking. I used to do a lot of
Exactly.
driving around the country.
Right, you're right, like the
Yeah, the
photo
trailers are
booths used to be, yeah.
What's his name there? Dashi or something, I can't remember his name. He's got like he's got the dreads, I don't know if you ever seen him downtown skiing for whatever reason. He has like, it's just a trailer, it's not a truck, it's a trailer, so it's like,
It's low enough,
It's
but why
low.
would they care if you're drive, I mean, if
I mean, I
you
guess-
use it as a drive-through?
I guess we can pay on your end if you decide.
Yeah, I would think the food truck person would say no drive-through because they didn't want anyone getting that close to them, and nobody knows how to drive. It's weird that that's like its own line in the city of Ludington one, it's not allowed to be used for drive-through service, like, I can't see the negative there.
I guess you just,
They must have had something happen, or that's usually where things come from. I mean, I think we're on the right track now.
To beat the heck out of it a little bit. and-
I got
Why-
plenty.
all right.
Well, I think we had two basic things, right? There was one were the timeframes, which were obviously easing up, but we have to determine exactly how much we're easing up so that Steve can write it in some form. And, I mean, so we have all the way from John, we would just eliminate the timeframes, have the other things, you have to have some trash receptacles, that type of stuff, to eliminate timeframes. All right, all the way to, we want to change essentially the 6 days per month, which is 14 straight days. But then after that, you need the temporary special use. Do we want to keep it at 30 days with renewals, or do we want to, we've discussed increasing it up to 90 days?
If we made it a really long time frame, what do we do if it becomes a nuisance or becomes unsafe or something? Because you're not even, there's no permit to revoke or anything, would you just, they're not following the ordinance, I guess, but
Right, if they're,
But I mean, it
if they're
doesn't say
violating
anything about
something else.
being a nuisance in here.
If they're violating something else, which I mean, something could be added, but if they're violating one of these other things, then you could revoke the permit.
But what if we extend, what if we say they don't need a permit for like 90 days, there's no permit to revoke then what do we do with them?
Well, that's
there is a
true.
nuisance thing, ordinance.
Yeah,
Say they're really popular and like traffic is backed up on like M120, like all hours of the day, like trying to get in this tiny parking lot for the food truck, and it's just become a complete nuisance.
it is.
Across the street from the overboard.
Is that what
Yeah, I agree with you, Jeff, that there's the operational stuff, and then there's the timing, allowable days.
Yeah, I think the length of time is
Yeah.
a small thing, like if we do the right thing with the other parts of this, the length of time, like I keep saying, like, whatever we set it at, they're gonna come to us, and we're gonna approve it, whether or not they've been following everything else. So, you know, you could have like a parking lot requirement, or, I don't know, there's probably a better way to do stuff.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. The time doesn't matter really at all. If they're good, they're good. If they're bad, then we need a way to get out of it.
And I think your concern about the traffic.
Yeah.
Section E,
Okay.
I wrote mobile food vendors and any associated seating or tables shall not be located so as to interfere with the clear vision or safe flow of traffic on the parcel or any adjacent parcel or right of way.
Okay, so that'd be our out. Like,
Yeah.
hey, you're
So
blocking
essentially, if
traffic,
you're
you
in-
gotta move along.
Yeah, if you're in a clear vision area,
That's perfect.
It's subjective, but it'll work, I guess, for now.
yeah, and I think it would work if we were to just eliminate the timelines
Yeah.
to a certain extent. We just need to make sure at what point does something become
Too permanent.
a permanent
Right.
fixture, needing site plan review, and I think that's ultimately the question, is at what point does something become permanent?
I feel like 60 days is plenty for,
60 days without
I
it.
feel like 30 is too short and 90 is a little scary. I don't know. I don't know.
I'll compromise, 60 cents.
And then that would be no permits.
Right, no permit, but
special use
following
permit.
these covenants.
But
Like,
they're
if
still
you ever
subject.
go out and you're like, okay, they're not following E, then we have to do something about it.
So would they still need to come in and declare that they're coming in on day one? Would they have to come to you? How will we know?
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Is
should
that-
they get a permit that's no cost for the first 60 days, or?
Like where they just,
They
basically
could.
they get a copy of this saying, here's your rules,
Yeah.
just stay within this and you don't have to do anything for 60 days.
Charge
You're
a lot.
up, you're good up to 60 days.
Charge us a
Day
lot.
61, we need you to apply for.
Yeah. It would be
That's true, it'd be
probably
nice to know when their start date was.
Who they are, and where they're from, and
Something, contact
My-
information.
yes, I don't know.
My hope was to not have to
Issue
have the food
permits.
truck vendor
Man,
have to go get a permit
Yeah.
just for operating.
That's why the short time frame,
And
the
that's why I
60 days
gave
per
it
month
that
is in there.
short,
Right.
but if we were to,
Because otherwise you're back.
Back to if they're violating,
yeah.
like you will hear about it.
Yeah.
Like if someone.
Someone will tell you the exact day they set
Yes,
up there and
exactly.
exactly what time.
Right, because you're gonna be back to, I mean, there's the moral imperatives of government. We don't have a police force. We do have the opportunity to become a charter township and increase taxes and do a police force. Probably not taking that on in the next
I think we have about
2.75 years.
10,000
So-
plus policemen in this.
Right, and so you're driven on that, and that has to be an enforcement process. I mean, without that, we have to significantly change the structure of the township government, which I don't think would necessarily be a bad thing. But it's a huge thing to tackle and to straighten out, and we're probably not gonna get to it in the next 2 3/4 years. So,
You're counting down already?
I've been counting on my phone, basically since I got announced, November 20th of 2024. But, so we're back to timeframe, because we skipped around quite a bit there. And, we, and I know Steve will write up whatever you guys want, right? But so do we want, like, you can just do what you want up to 60 days? Is that the idea? And then, but if they're violating something, if they're violating E, then we'll go through the enforcement process. Someone will complain to us, we'll do an inspection, send notification, whatnot.
If something's been there, if something's been there for 30, 60 days, I think, like, you made a good point about, like, what's their intention? Like, they should probably have to come in and say, hey, I'm only gonna be here another week or something, or I'm intending on staying here till the end of time. That makes sense to find out what their intention is.
And at what point maybe should that be occurring, or what should be the goal?
We had 60 days thrown out there.
30, 60, or 90. How do you guys feel, 30,
We're in that
60, 90?
accessory building thing.
I know.
2, 9,
I know.
46.
1/12 to 1/4 of the unit.
I mean, 60 days, does that sound reasonable? I mean, I don't have a number, this is new experience.
90, I mean, that's a quarter of a year. I mean, if something's gonna be, that's getting pretty permanent.
90 days, and then if they violate anything, we can go in and, I mean, that's,
And that covers them for the summer.
Who's gonna run around policing though? You're at the 91.
I guess that's,
No, I know.
the timeframe does seem pretty, you know, I guess that's 90, 60, 90, 72?
Okay, but if they're in, okay, but just to tell you, if they're on a resource conservation parcel, it's okay for them too, like, because then because,
Non-residential use.
Right, so if you had like, the reason that's put in there is what if you have like a church that wants to have a food truck for an event one day or something, but they're in a residential or an agricultural area? Should they be allowed to do that? I think the obvious answer is yes, and so we wanted to make provision for that.
And that actually, the way it's worded with the being approved non-residential use, there would be no vacant land in ag and residential.
although, I mean, you almost don't wanna let them stay too long, because then they're not really, the township's not gaining what they could if you were, I mean, if you were taxing like their personal property or, you know, things like that, because then suddenly they're not really, like a business, I mean, I feel like a business, a restaurant or something gives back more to the township, or no?
Well, so that's the question of when does it become a permanent operation?
Too
And
permanent.
it should come to you for a site review as a
Right.
restaurant, essentially.
Right.
Or similar to a restaurant use. And so what we could do is, because we've got another week before you guys vote on stuff, we have Steve write it up as 60. And if you want to debate 90 or 30, or slide that number around, that can occur next week as well. That's real easy to change in your motion. Say, I'm looking at approving this, but I want to change it from 60 days to 57.
Most temporary SOUs allow for 30 days or 60 days with a one-time extension administratively, a third extension with planning commission approval. One is 90 days, but that's for living in a mobile home while you're building a permanent house. So if you use that line of thinking, 30 or 60 days once, maybe half a year is about as long as something should go while still being considered temporary. If anything's longer than that, it would need to be considered permanent and be established, pay taxes.
What is that based on, just out of curiosity?
This
Is
from,
that just the general?
I'm just reasoning based on the temporary special use permits, how long, the time periods that are allowed.
Like you put a trailer
See,
here.
that's something we can put our finger on, that's something we can actually point to, other than trying to set an arbitrary
Yeah.
time. So, but 6 months for a food truck, hey.
If you're there 6 months, you're doing some business, that's
Yeah.
making people in the township happy.
Do the food trucks do they leave the truck there overnight, drive home in a separate car, or they drive the truck?
I believe they have to return it to a commissary every night, so it's not part of there every night.
There's state laws for those.
Okay,
So I think most people just, they drive the truck.
Yeah.
They're driving
so,
the truck.
all right.
Yeah, 6 months. Just get as strict as you want with the rules. I think that's the way to do it. I mean, it opens it up, makes it nice and open for, getting a brick and mortar business to start a restaurant is like, I would never, that's like the hard way to make money. This is an opportunity for people to increase it.
So go with those options, is that,
Yeah, so what timeline, or what time frame would work best? Do you think 6 months would be reasonable to say? You know, at 6 months, you're permanent and need permanent approval. Anytime less than 6 months.
Didn't you just say you can't live for more than 90 days in a mobile home while you're building your house, and now we're just gonna let food trucks be here for half the year? Like,
Well, it's 90 days with another extension.
oh, okay.
So you can do,
You can do.
So it would actually be the same.
and then a
Right.
third, you could do a third with planning commission approval. So 3/4 of the year.
That's like someone's house. That's like,
Yeah.
this is more like
But
a
I think
business.
the idea behind why that's the largest.
Yeah. What's the shortest one in there, 30 days?
The shortest is 30.
And what's that?
Right.
Thing.
It's typically for seasonal uses, use of camping trailer as residence when you're not building, personal storage units. There is a 12-month, but that's for signs and supplies for building sites, so like
Oh,
a contractor sign.
Okay.
So the longer term ones are based on being ready, getting the site prepared for permanent use.
Mm-hmm.
6 months?
I guess my only question is, what's this, the 6 months is what, again? Just like
Before they
clarify that.
need any permit?
So they would be able to operate for 6 months in the same location.
Or within the township. If they're gonna be there 6 months in one spot, they're gonna be wildly successful, I would think. Otherwise, they're gonna probably wanna gypsy around a little. They're gonna be on White Lake Road or
Yeah.
Holton Road, right?
Yeah, my thought behind it is,
Generally,
if you're in one location, because then you're establishing a use. But if you're bouncing around a different location every day, you're not establishing a permanent use anywhere.
okay, yeah. There's kind of two ways I just reminded myself to
Yeah.
think about it. A semi brick and mortar operation and a special events vehicle. And I guess the operator could do both, or one or the other, or in lieu of a brick and mortar, that operator probably won't move around much, right? He'll stay where people will get accustomed to seeing them there. And on the other hand, then you got the wedding people that move around.
Right, you have a little bit of two separate issues. Most likely, I mean, most food trucks operate like food trucks do. They go somewhere for a day, two, and then they go somewhere else. I mean, the one we're talking about is this, kind of this new use of where they park at an old gas station up in Muskegon, an empty lot in Whitehall, and then use it on a more permanent basis, which is more of a land use, and whereas a food truck moving around is not really land use as much as a food truck moving around.
If we did 6 months, are we taking something away from the township? Are we, you know, are permanent businesses more desirable than mobile businesses? Is there really any difference?
A lot of times, so what I inquired into over this, because food trucks were very controversial a number of years ago when they were first becoming very popular, especially in cities. And the idea is that if someone's gonna park a food truck right in front of a restaurant, and then the restaurant's paying taxes, the food truck is not paying taxes, and they're taking all of their business. You're gonna lose all of your restaurants, which we largely killed them with COVID stuff anyway. But you're gonna lose all your restaurants, and then you're gonna lose all this tax revenue, and then you're not gonna be a nice area to come to, that kind of thing. I talked with Traverse City, which is one of the most successful places in the state, I believe, for food trucks. And they're a bit more restrictive, but they're also more of a city, and they've had them for a while. And they said, I was talking with the city manager, I believe, And she was saying that they have found that to not be true.
Okay.
There are two different customers that go to the different places. If you park a food truck next to a restaurant, you will have customers splitting, but they're not actually overlapping. And so they did not find that the businesses were hurt by
Okay.
that. And so they didn't find that there was a need to address that, which is what everyone thought at the beginning. And what has more happened is that your brick and mortar businesses say, you know what, we want to also have a truck, so we can bounce around to some different locations. And then someone starts, or the opposite, someone starts a truck because they don't have the capital to buy a restaurant, which is a big investment, but people like their food, they get that dialed in, they get enough money to buy a location, and then they operate both. So you can start from either end and end up operating both. So they don't seem to contradict and compete with each other like that.
I think the 6-month period is like this courtship period where if somebody gets anywhere close to 6 months, they're establishing a permanent use. It's obviously a good location, and then they could go into like a permanent, like it's a restaurant, right? But that gives somebody the opportunity to come in and try it. Oh, I've tested this area for 6 months, now it's time to just take the wheels off and put it on blocks and call it a restaurant, so. But it gives the opportunity, so.
And so, just to clarify, I know we're beating the time to death on this, but that item number C, the way it's written now with the 6 days per month and temporary special use over 30 days, we're talking about 6 months, but we're talking about a 90-day renewal for the special land use. Are we then, and we talked about 14 days before, but, I mean, Steve is he's gonna write changes to this, but if I was Steve, I'd be slightly unclear on what I'm writing at this point. All right? And so, are we saying that you can do up to 14 days anywhere, and that's completely fine, and then you get a 90-day temporary special use after that, that's renewable once administratively? Is that?
Well, can I also, are they required to be licensed by the health department?
Yes.
Yes, I think we did say that.
Okay, but, but it says if such inspection is required, do we know for sure if it's required?
It is.
But only in Muskegon County, because like when at the campground, we had food vendors coming in from other counties, and some of them didn't have any license at all. Their county didn't require it, so, like, some of them you'd be like Kent County, they'd have to have a sticker in the window. But, like, some guy came in from like Allegan County, and he's like, we don't do that. So, we're basically letting an unlicensed restaurant work in the township for up to 6 months then.
Well,
Because-
but I think in that case, that guy, I believe technically, he should have gotten one through Muskegon County.
Oh, because he was,
To be in the county.
okay.
It's
Okay.
not your origin point, it's where you're operating. So if you take a food truck and you want to drive across the United States operating it, every municipality
Okay.
you go to, you have to re-register.
Gosh, I bet they don't. I mean, he was there for 2 hours. I guarantee he wouldn't have even thought
Yeah.
about going to our county to get.
Catch me now.
Yeah, I mean, it'd be difficult to do, you'd have to have a full-time secretary process the paperwork.
I know what it's like to deal with the health department with a restaurant, and I just feel bad if everybody doesn't have to do that too, because it's so much fun.
Well, let's not be part of the problem.
I guess that kind of messes up in section 2 on the mobile food vendor. It says the zoning administrator may authorize a mobile food vendor to operate on the same parts for up to 30 days. So you're going to have to authorize it right there. But if we're saying you can just do it without a permit, then you're not authorized, correct?
Yeah,
Kind of throws, you'd have to change that.
I would take that section out. So if you take out the section,
Yeah.
the 3 days, 6 days in a month, that would be taken out. The least restrictive way to do it would be, you can operate on a single parcel for up to 180 days without a permit.
I mean, I guess, imagine most guys, or whoever, the operators, most likely, if you're gonna open up shop, probably gonna stop here first, I would imagine, anyway, to open up, just to see what they have to do, I would imagine, correct?
In most cases, they would.
People do check in.
I would think so, I mean, most guys, they have to in other places, so I imagine they would come here, so I guess, yeah, give them this and say, here you go, just, and then, but, then I guess how do you, reduce up the days? I like this, let them do it, but then like you said, like, if we are gonna re-up it, how do we know where they are, who they are, whatever kind of thing, to get that set up, you know, if they did get to that 6 months, it's not, I like,
Well, if they've been in the same place for 6 months, they should be easy to find.
they should be easy to find, correct, but I'm just,
Some of us have probably eaten there by that point.
yeah. so I'm
If
just-
we never have any contact with them ever until 180 days, we would never really know whether they did this providing proof of inspection by the health department, would we? If we don't even know who they are, what they are, we definitely wouldn't be checking your license or anything.
It's not a monkey wrench.
No.
Think of 180
Don't-
days without somebody calling on them for not displaying the proper, I mean, this is America in 2022, like,
People who eat at food trucks probably don't care about that.
well,
No, the other
there
people
will
that
be
don't.
always somebody.
Oh, Karen will pull in just to see
Yeah.
whether they got it and then pull right back out.
And I don't see any zoning restrictions on restaurants saying you have to have health department inspections. And they have to.
Oh, because
submit
those
the
are,
same-
laws that exist already, whether the township existed or not, those laws at the county and the state exist.
The only reason I have reservations is because I like to keep the playing field level for everybody. It feels unfair when the newfangled food trucks get to do stuff. Michigan's Adventure has to have a Muskegon County Health Department permit for every single one of their push carts. The lemonade cart, the pretzels, every single one has to be licensed individually. And now we're saying that someone can be here for 6 months and we'll check your license after 6 months to see, and then find out the whole time that they didn't even have the proper health department permit. I just feel like.
Yeah, but I don't send Steve out to check all the licenses at the restaurants.
Yeah, and is
That's
Fruitland
true.
looking at every, because that would be mobile food vendors. Is Fruitland checking every cart at Michigan Adventure?
Yeah, I got you.
So it's really,
That's true.
it's
Because
really
it's-
not my jurisdiction.
Right, because it's the county jurisdiction, so they should be doing it, but we don't have the jurisdiction to tell the county
Sure.
how to do that.
Yes. That falls under the category of not our problem, so,
Well,
which is good to have those every.
Our problem, not our authority.
Okay, thank
It's
you.
like the lake levels, all right?
Yeah.
It's God's authority, but my problem.
Okay, well, I think we beat it to death. I got all my questions answered, so I'm good.
Do we have a pretty good idea for you? or do you-
180
what do you
days.
I have a pretty good idea.
Okay.
I'll bring it, I'll revise the draft.
Guess
We
you
can look at
better-
it next week,
need? Okay.
and if you want to make any changes.
Yeah, send it up.
Guess you
I'm
get
sure
an
there'll
email
be
if you got any
additional
questions.
changes, but
Can-
Jesse hasn't seen it yet.
You can let us know what it says.
If we're away in the agenda, we can jump to number 3. These fine people have
yeah.
donated their time to hear us talk about food trucks.
No, actually, I like it. I got all kinds of ideas popping up, so I'm not gonna say a word.
All right, let's go ahead and jump down to the discussion items. We'll go start off with number 3, setbacks in lake residential zoning district.
I read the email that you had forwarded us from the lawyer, and I don't know this section well enough yet, and I'm confused after reading quite a bit of it, but I did get the last page, and he's got his recommendations there, so that's where I started. Getting
While
more
I
involved.
appreciated his recommendation, I think it's a little complex.
It is.
Yeah.
And I thought of a way to simplify that.
Oh, good.
Would be, he's essentially saying, move things around so it doesn't say 60 feet, but you can't go in front of your eaves. Saying move the eaves down below to the section about setback averaging.
Mhm.
We could just get rid of the eaves rule completely. the question, because I think this originally came up, it might have been my second day on the job. On another controversial part of the lake, a gentleman wanted to expand towards the lake. It was about 100, over 100 feet from the lake was his setback. But both of his neighbors were also 100 feet from the lake. So if he were to move out any further, he would be projecting in front of the eaves of his neighbors. And since this was a controversial area, Lorraine emailed the lawyer and just to make sure we had a good interpretation. We both wanted to interpret it the other way to allow him to move it forward to within 60 feet or to average. But the attorney said that we couldn't use the following section to negate the previous section unless it specifically said we could. And that's in his email. I'm trying to find the section here.
That's my first.
Jeff, get the marker ready over there, because I might need an image. Based on the interpretation of this. I'm serious.
Oh, yeah.
I'm trying to in my mind and going, okay, what is this
Yeah.
one?
We've been through a lot of lake stuff.
Is it the averaging that's throwing us off? Is
What's
that the
throwing
problem?
us off is the eve line rule, that it's 60 feet, but you cannot project in front of the eaves of the
Because you're
adjacent properties.
unduly obscuring the view.
And that's,
Yeah.
It went with that same thing.
Yes.
Yeah,
It's in the
we
same
eliminated
line of
that,
thought.
because that wasn't legal anyway, that was ridiculous.
so my preference would actually be to get rid of it
Yes.
altogether, because it's something that's, and the attorney even said, it's not that workable, because if you're at, you're at 70 feet, the neighbor to the west is at 60 feet, you have empty lot to the other side, and he decides to build back 80 feet. He then establishes your setback that says you can't go any further.
So then you're in violation.
So
Right.
he's punishing you
Right.
for putting his house behind yours.
Well, and none of this happens in a regular residential district. Like,
Exactly.
I can be, if my lot meets the setbacks, then it doesn't matter what any of my neighbors are doing.
Yeah.
I really would like to get the lake
And
front
this
sites
is-
moved in that direction.
And really, it's,
More objective would be.
I think taking that eaves line out would be more in line with the purpose of the district.
Mhm.
Where the purpose of the district was actually to allow people to build onto their properties.
Who's the,
And this section of the ordinance actually prohibits people from building onto their properties if their neighbors all have the old setback.
Yeah, I think that's good. I don't,
who determines the lake,
So it's
the distance? Where does the lake begin and end?
yes,
Or
so
begin?
That was,
it's the ordinary,
There's a legal lake
yeah.
limit, I know.
that was
So it's,
set.
it is, the wording of the ordinance is the ordinary high water mark. And there's actually an elevation that was established by the Corps of Engineers in the 80s when they put in the lake level outlet device.
Mhm.
And that's the elevation I've been using, the land at this elevation, that's your setback, or that's your front lot line. And there's also videos by the DEQ that talk about how to identify the high water mark,
Okay.
ordinary high water mark. And it's also available on, if you were to do a survey, building a new house, you would need Eagle approval. And that would be on the permit.
Is it, like 278.5 feet above sea level,
I think
something like that?
it's either 6 or 8.
Yeah, we're in the sixes.
70 something.
we're in
Yeah.
the 5,
Oh, right, and then.
it's
it's
about
6.
605 or,
Yeah.
it's gotta be around there, that's what.
I have it on a sticky note on my computer.
Ends in 7.
Would you know that if you took your ideas to an architect or
far as the high water mark goes,
Right,
they come out to the site,
and
and if they,
survey,
you know, they prepare with the ordinance,
right.
they have a way to calculate that. I'm not
So if
quite
that
so-
60 feet would mean something to you to where you knew where you could go back to.
Yeah,
Definitely, definitely, yeah. But the other issue, of course, is the other part of the ordinance that establishes the deck as my setback. And it's been there quite a few years,
Right.
and
Yes.
Lorraine was just saying, well, that is my setback, I can build all the way out to it, right?
Just not beyond,
Yeah, just not beyond.
because that's already been
Yeah.
permitted and established as the setback.
And I could draw you some beautiful pictures up there of my spot, just to show you the
right.
problem that causes, but.
That's, yeah, I think we're dealing
So
with,
it actually would,
Yeah.
yeah,
I
Would
think we're
you-
dealing with
Would you give us
ordinances
your
that
address
are
and
dated.
let us maybe, I'd like to look at
There's a
Google
few-
Earth when I get
Yeah,
home.
there's a few things
So
here.
it's
actually would,
6722
Mueller,
Mueller.
M-U.
Oh, Mueller.
M as
Okay.
in mom.
They're not very dated because the ordinance is fairly new. It was created because if you wanted to build on one of the lake lots, you probably had to come before the zoning board of appeals to get a variance to build. And so it was created, like Steve was saying, with the idea of allowing people to build without coming to the zoning board of appeals every time.
Yeah. It seems like that would be difficult on many lakes, inland lakes in Michigan, because many properties have been built in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, and it was the wild, wild west. You could build a platform out to the beach if you wanted, probably back then. So I think that's one issue that is very difficult to deal with when we have new ordinances. On the other hand, I grew up on a small lake. I live on the lake, Twin Lake now. I also am in a camp where to have that nice platform out really could disturb someone else's enjoyment of their view and their property and their lake. So it's difficult. There's a lot of issues boiling up here, for lake property, and it's always been that way. Somebody's, upset about this or that.
Just to make it easier, I have letters from all these neighbors saying, we don't object. And here's an example.
That's a great thing to
Yeah,
have.
well, boy, that's helpful. But, there's an example, our house is sitting here, our neighbor's house is out here, and if I could go out to his eat line, I could put my addition on, okay? However, I have the small house here, which keeps me from doing that. And then this house here adds a few more feet, this house is way out here,
Right.
and this is within 200 feet on each side according to the ordinance. Now, I also,
Does that include, those drawings include their deck or their patios or their dock
it's
walkways?
the front of, this doesn't include his deck, because that even goes further out.
Yeah, it's got a big one there, I see it.
But my deck is probably out about like that. Probably about matching this. And they just added onto their house, and this is porch.
Yeah.
So they could enclose that now and insulate it and have another room, I guess. So anyhow, this is
The
the
Gardens
house.
move in next to you? Is that the house that just sold?
Yes,
Yeah,
Leo
this,
and Kathy?
yes.
yeah. Theirs is right here.
Yeah.
And so, according to Lorraine, I would have been able to put my addition right here if I wanted it that big, but I can't afford that. And then their deck is somewhere out in here. And his house is kind of at an angle because of the way the lake goes. So it's probably more like that.
Do we know if any of those would fit within today's ordinance on the 60 foot and so on and so forth?
This one would, for sure. And
I know your house, even the deck is behind the 60-foot mark.
yes, yeah,
Yes.
you're right,
We're
correct.
way back.
So, yeah, if I could afford it, I'd love to go out to where my deck is, like Lorraine said, hold on, do that right now. And, he just added his deck, updated it, fixed it, did a nice job, and, he's over there. It's just kind of like that, if you went with what Steve was talking about, really that heat line thing, get it out of there, average this, this, this. That should allow me to come very
How
close.
close are those homes together?
They've got all the required setbacks, except maybe the one that Leo just bought. 'Cause
Yeah,
they-
between you and Leo, that's pretty tight through
That's
there.
His, I'd say at best, if you count his deck, he maybe has a foot to my property line.
That's like the north side of Twin Lake. Same thing, they're like real tight there. And all the septics are out toward your street.
Yeah, well, a lot of the septics are around the lake, of course. Why they did that, I have no idea.
How they allowed that.
That's a good health department rule.
Really?
Yeah, it's very common, and that's one of the reasons, well, that's a major reason that the lake level outlet device was put in with the channels, and why there is a legal limit on how high the lakes can go.
But, and I think that showed you what I'm talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
thank you.
Thank you.
See,
But on this,
Yeah, it's.
I mean, working this out objectively is important, and so, Steve's in a weird position on these, especially the lakes in general. So we just had the deck issue that came to the zoning board of appeals twice, and Steve ended up being overruled on how he had read it, but it was unclear, and then we had to come to you guys to get clarified. And so we have a bunch of this stuff that's muddled and unclear. And we probably spent, did we spend thousands of dollars on the lawyer on that deck issue, Steve?
I have not calculated that.
We don't really pay attention because we need the lawyer when we need the lawyer. On the deck issue, it was a ridiculous amount for a deck. So it's very excessive. And so these types of issues, they're similar. We had the unduly obscure before, which was over a fence. And so, and this is, it's similar. It's probably going to be somewhat controversial no matter what move is made. But if we make it objective, that people can argue it with the lawyer every time, Steve can read it clearly and everyone can say, well, that's what it says.
Yeah.
And then we can try to minimize the amount of money that we're spending on lawyers because other people are having their lawyers contact us. That would be ideal.
I think I agree with what you're saying, Jeff. We all have the same spirit, I think, in that, well, we want to make it fair. We want to preserve the beautiful landscape and your view of the lake, and that's really what needs to happen. But there's a formula to make that legitimate.
Right, we have to do it in such a way
Somehow.
that it actually works. Now, if you just have, I mean, the easiest, simplest, most forward way to do something is do it a setback. You have to set your house back 60 feet, boom, there it is. And that's it. The reason you get into the eaves lines and doing the averages and this type of stuff is to preserve neighbors' views on these various angles. And so, but that's hard to write in to make work. I mean, this works better than unduly obscure.
I think, what Casey said is exactly right. If this was any other property, take the lake out, it's very simple. You have setback, this,
Right.
we need to get to that point where it's just common sense.
Right.
That's the problem. We get into this and you try, and I'm sure that the intent was probably for someone to go that way, let's make it so they can't block each other's view. Well, after a while, we all know that,
That becomes really muddled after a while.
yeah, and it's,
Well, because if you have this averaging game, like you were saying, so if you have these two houses here, and then someone
Right.
builds a house back here, well, this person's already in violation, even if they had extra space up here where they could have added on. As soon as he builds, well, you're in violation now. You're obviously going to be allowed to exist. Where you could have built, if you had more than 60 feet here, well, that's now negated because this person chose to build it after you.
I mean, most people, when they're averaging in any mathematical sort of real way, they always throw out the highest and lowest, because you don't want those outliers to do too much, so
And I think any averaging,
averaging can be ugly.
in my opinion, any averaging that's done should be between the house to the left and the house to the right. I don't think it should be
Too far
within
away.
200.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I
too-
agree.
100,
Yeah,
because
I think I agree.
what is 3 houses down, what does their setback matter to you?
Well, and what is exactly exactly does this mean when it says, but the eave of the principal building and any attached porch, terrace, deck, or balcony
Yes.
shall not project? So what's the eave of a deck? I mean, what are we even talking about?
Well, it's,
So
if
like-
you have a deck,
Yep,
that deck cannot project in front of the eve of your neighbor.
who cares?
Ours does.
Whose doesn't on it?
Ours is probably 30 feet out. You know,
Yeah.
whoever allowed that to be zoned in the way they did, good for them. It's 38 feet out.
It doesn't block anyone's view?
No,
No,
if you,
that's-
Because it's terraced down.
yeah,
Yeah.
so,
But even if it wasn't, I
But we
mean,
were also told you can put a wall up on your deck.
the privacy.
There are no rules about what you can do for privacy.
why can't it
And
just
that
be
would
60
block.
feet from the high water mark?
That would be-
Nothing of your, nothing permanent can go 60 feet from high water mark.
That would be
my
beautiful.
That would
preference.
make your job a lot easier.
Oh,
Yeah, it'd make an ordinance
Maybe
enforcement.
we
Something
would
that
have an
everybody
attorney involved.
has.
Everybody has a tape
Everybody
measure.
has-
Right.
Everybody
That's
has,
right.
and it's, we all measure with inches, we aren't gonna get into metrics, we won't muddy the water, we'll just keep it.
Yeah.
Does that not make sense?
And if somebody next to you builds out that far and it obscures something, well, then you still, you can build out that
Right.
too.
That's right.
And if you're not able to, well,
Then go sit out in your yard in a lawn chair and enjoy the view. I mean,
You're on your pontoon boat.
right, just get on your boat, turn the music up and just enjoy life. I feel like these setbacks need to be hard and fast so everybody can know what, is right.
That's wonderful, but there's so many that won't fall within whatever number we come up with. I mean, there's
Well,
homes, like I
the
said. there's homes-
pre-existing violations, you're gonna allow,
Right.
Yes,
you know? I mean,
there's always
right.
pre-existing.
right, that's like, just like Los Lagos, I mean, that didn't meet setbacks by
Right.
anyone's measurement, unless you got back into the 1920s when it was built, and zoning didn't come to Michigan in the Zoning Enabling Act until 1943.
Yeah.
But at that point, it was allowed to exist as long as it could. Yeah, grandfathered in, and
Is North Lake low like the other lakes? Like quite low or?
We're not technically connected according to the drain commissioner. I talked to her, and that came out to my benefit. However, I think because of just the way the groundwater flows, they're probably close. I wish the water would get back up a little bit. It's almost down too far too fast.
yeah, it's
It really has.
Quite a way.
In Twin Lake, I've got probably
678 feet, 0.5.
25 for 30 feet of additional land exposed from last year. Of course, everybody knows that, but that's quite a bit.
Yeah,
Yes.
It's fine with me, it's shallow anyway and whatever, but I didn't know if you were looking at that too.
But even when our water level was up as high as we've ever seen it, and people said this is as high as it's been in
Yeah.
30, 40 years, we still had the 60-foot
Yeah,
distance
Yeah.
from the lake. So we could have built at that point even. So that high water mark, I think is a good way to do the measuring on that.
And we can't raise it, or most likely we can't, so there was flooding in the late 1970s with all the large snowstorms. That's why those were put in. And I believe in the late 1980s, Merle Hill was the supervisor, and he had requested with the state that they raise that level, the mandated level, and by foot. And he was rejected because it would put some of the septics in danger, which has obviously occurred when we had the high water over the last few years, which then raises the phosphorus levels in the lakes and those types of things. So the level that it's set at as our high water mark, we aren't going to be able to legally go above by the state for any foreseeable future until sewers run up there, and that will probably be after I'm dead. So.
Dead, right to that.
all I can say, I guess, if I'm allowed to talk, is if you went with a 60-foot setback, and of course the lake goes around in a circle, most of them do, it provides a consistency for the neighborhood, so that everybody has the chance to do the same thing. And the people that happened to slip through years ago, grandfather in, I guess you call it,
Right.
fine.
That's life.
It's the way it is.
A lot of
Well,
people
you knew
get-
that when you built, or when
Right.
you bought the house you
Yeah.
are living in.
But nothing new goes beyond the 60 foot.
Yeah.
Right.
We've set,
That's so
we've set a
simple.
new hard.
Right.
That's
To me,
much-
that
Yeah.
sounds like the common sense approach to this.
What's the
Is
counter
Sorry,
to
you
that?
guys in the office.
the high water mark, the high water mark is something that people can access? Or,
The high water marks doesn't mean anything. It's the legal limit of the lake that the Department of Natural Resources sets, or Corps of Engineers. High water is just, you're gonna live with it.
Yeah,
No,
but-
I don't mean
but
like-
where you would actually tell that
Where
is
you measure
difficult.
from.
to
Yeah.
measure.
Because,
It is what it is.
because to have a very accurate reading, you need a survey.
Well, anything major going in the lake would need
A survey.
Eagle approval
Right.
anyway, and Eagle should be putting on where the ordinary high water mark is.
They're
Right.
measuring it, and they're probably requiring
I
a
would-
survey.
So,
Yeah.
yes, and then they know where they can build.
Sometimes, depending on the site, you can go out and see where it is,
Sometimes it's under, it's,
but sometimes it's under the water.
Right.
How would Clint go out to, or Clay?
He would not, he wouldn't do that. This isn't something that he would do.
Okay, so we don't have any,
That would
so
be,
we're really worrying about something when we say 60 feet. It's from a printed,
it would be from a printed,
A survey?
sheet established by a surveyor.
right.
so we'd
You're
have,
talking 100
that's good. See, so we're not held liable for what we determine.
Yeah.
It will
If
be.
the high water mark is not, if it's easily seen and not disputed, I would require a survey. But if it's something that is difficult to see where the high water mark is, a survey would be needed just to verify that that's where it is.
And with a survey, probably the only controversial thing you get in specifics is there's a mandated level of a difference of a half a foot between summer and winter levels, which is how that lake level outlet device was supposed to operate. Now should be operating correctly, given no one knows how long, but.
So what's the counter to, if we go to a hard set 60 feet, what's gonna be the gripe, or who's the next lawyer that's gonna be calling to say, whoa, 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 this.
The various people on the lake. We're probably gonna get calls from lawyers and people
It's
on the
gonna
lake, no
be-
matter what we do,
just
because
people's
they're lakes. And so, the thing will be with unduly obscuring the view. And that's why they put so much of that in before, I think, was probably to manage a few people's ideas of obscuring views, and even literally put in unduly obscured view. So, which is a fine intention.
So really, the person who's sitting back always on their home and not planning on doing any type of improvement, but then somebody now comes in and says, I'm gonna put 60 feet on this side, I'm now gonna block their view.
They're gonna be upset, right?
So they're gonna be upset, and the opportunity for them is then build closer to the lake. And it's the same, they have the same opportunity, but at the same time, if that's not their plan, they still have the view in front. And it doesn't really, it's not a tunnel. We're not putting them into something that limits the trees and anything else that might be, there's things that could block view, or, I think it's common sense. I can see that being the case. You're gonna have somebody that's gonna say, well, that blocks my view. But we're talking about taking that out, correct?
Well, the unduly obscured is already gone.
In a regular residential neighborhood, you may only get the view straight out of your house. You're not guaranteed this like 180 view in any of our other zoning
You didn't buy
districts
that,
except
you
up
didn't buy the
the
view, you bought the property.
Yeah. So you get to see straight out, that's what you get.
That's
If you're lucky enough to get like a 180 view, then good for you, but otherwise, you can
Correct.
see.
But
It's
if-
not like you're building right in front of their house, in between them and the lake.
And realistically, no matter how the ordinance comes out, I mean, you guys are here now over the opposite. And so I think it's ideal probably to have some sort of objective thing worked out where we could minimize controversy, or at least the controversy is something like your ordinance is wrong, but at least at that point it's clear. Because if it's unclear, then we have the lawyer bringing
Yes.
a deck to the zoning board of appeals twice you know, and these types of things. So I don't think, I mean, you're not 9,400 people, whatever we have, no one's ever going to agree on everything. And so I don't think you're gonna eliminate complaints on lakes no matter what we do. There's just a lot of controversies between natives and lakes.
I agree.
I'm not fully sure why. It'd be
I think it's just
interesting
so tight
psychological
together.
study.
They're so close together, like they said, their
Yeah.
neighbor's not even conforming on the side lot, so.
And I think part of it is you move out, you're like, I'm gonna move out to a lake, like a little ways out. And then you get jammed right in next to
Right.
somebody, right? And you're like, oh, I'm gonna be out here relaxing at the lake, and then it's like, you can just talk to your neighbors across your lots,
Right,
more like a, yeah, more like a city.
Yeah.
I've lived in cities like that, that's fine, but.
I keep coming back
And you
to
need to
like,
move to the
if that was
country.
something that you really valued.
Right over there.
That's not your thing, you, yeah.
right, dig your own lake.
If your privacy and distance was.
I live on
something
a
valued,
lake, it's
that
mine,
was the wrong
it's
one.
all mine.
Exactly, exactly. Should have applied themselves.
Buy your own
The
land.
ordinance states there's social aspects to the lake that need to be protected.
There you go.
Social.
Yeah.
You can't zone
Well, you
people
can
to like
argue
their
that that would
neighbors, you
be
can't. I mean,
unduly obscuring views.
So it's compact, it's close together,
Yeah.
that's just the kind of lake
The
it
tempers
is.
start flaring.
Yeah.
And for your purposes, if you have a neighbor that has friendly enough neighbors, or neighbors that are friendly enough to say, we don't object, everybody within 200 feet, here's letters, we don't care. That should really cut down any attorney worries, I would think.
It should.
Because they
Yeah.
signed something
Yeah.
saying.
Should at least make it easy to win the case.
Right.
Yeah.
That was really good that you did that.
No, you don't wanna tick off your neighbors, and if you go and ask them and let them know what you're doing.
Some neighbors don't care though. You
We've
do,
been
that's
through
nice
that,
that you
so
did
we're
that.
trying
It
not
really
to do
is.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd like to get along, and we've been treated that way in the past, so that kind of feeling, I don't care to put that on anyone else, so. If they know our intent, and that we're not building all the way out, then they still have their views, and this 60-foot setback gives people a view. I mean, you may have things that get in the way, but look around Spring Lake.
Yeah.
How's your water there? You know, everybody's water well, good?
As far as we know, there are a lot of people dying, so I'm not sure.
A lot of
Yeah,
cancer.
they really are.
Very scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I brought that up at your lake treatment place. I said, you know, we have people all around this lake dying from cancer. And I think her answer was, well, I haven't seen any, heard anything about any animals dying. And I said, I'm talking about people, Paul. And change the subject. Okay.
Yeah.
Someday,
We'll find out.
cigarette manufacturer, lake treater, we'll find out.
Well, yeah, they keep discovering new chemicals.
Right.
I mean, PFAS is the big thing now.
Yeah.
Right? You know, I've seen demonstrations in seminars and stuff like that, and they're like, PFAS is in these things. And then they just show a room of stuff, like this room. They would just show this room. And you're like, wow, it's in everything? They're like, yeah, it's in the chairs and the clothes and the everything. And you're like, okay, well, I don't think we're getting away from that.
It's one thing to sit on it, it's another thing to drink it.
Well, PFAS wraps itself around your DNA. We don't know what it does to your DNA, other than wrap around it at this point.
That's scary.
Next generation figure that out.
Yeah.
So under this discussion, are we then looking at, so then under 9.5E, is that where you're looking at the front yard, 60 foot into the principal building?
Yes.
So is it just 60 foot average? I mean, 60 foot from,
It would be 60 foot from the ordinary high water mark. Unless you wanted to do something where if your neighbors were ahead of that and had non-conforming setbacks, you could average only your neighbors. That would be the only thing that could.
I'm not sure
add it,
when,
But a 60 hard
Well, because then you're just, if your neighbor is non-conforming, you're gonna let somebody else basically be non-conforming by average? Is that what you're saying? That's probably not a good idea.
Yeah, it would allow flexibility for you to average your neighbors.
But what if both of your neighbors are non-conforming?
They're both at 40.
Yeah, if both your neighbors are at 40,
Wouldn't that then let
You
you
would then-
become
it would
non-conforming?
then allow you to go to 40.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I don't know about allowing it.
Because then we're just making a bunch of, then they're all, like, the whole lake could start becoming
I
non-conforming.
think that that's
Yeah.
allowed.
What?
Wouldn't that be allowed? Can you get into a lawsuit with that too?
Well, you need to also do
So
it.
you get allowed to do anything, but I'm just
I mean,
saying,
where
that
Doc
seems like
Martens-
it's begging for it right there. Like,
Yeah,
Now you're making an ordinance to do non-conforming, which I thought you're not.
Right,
I remember reading some-
it'd be nice to draw a line like we do with other setbacks, like restaurant setbacks,
Yeah,
like Los Lagos. That one's allowed to conform, but no one else is after whenever the thing is implemented. Yeah, and I mean, you're gonna get that controversy, like what Steve is saying, you're gonna get people coming in and saying that it should be that way. But then you get into almost the same mess.
And that might be a case where we set it at 60, but the two neighbors at 40, you would get a variance for that because your two neighbors.
They could
Are
go to the
40.
zoning board of
Yeah.
appeals.
Right.
They could.
And approach it from that angle, and then we could look at that, and again, we're only supposed to do it if,
Hardships, what if it's?
yeah, really, that would not be a hardship, it would just be, this is what I wanna do, and it would not meet that. So I think we're on pretty solid ground if we say the 60 feet
Right.
from that, and just leave it at that, and then Steve can.
Deal with it.
That's really a better way to say it, but.
Well, because if you're just gonna let a bunch of
years,
if you're gonna let a bunch of non-conforming uses in, then why do we even have anything to conform to? If you're just,
It's
oh,
happened
you're,
every time they did lot coverage, we made immediately, as soon as they went to the one lot coverage, every one of them had to be 1 acre minimum
Yeah.
parcels, and there was a lot of under 1 acre parcels.
Mhm.
But it did clarify, so moving forward,
right,
so I think we're kind of not looking at rear
it's
view
long
mirror.
term.
Exactly, because we
Yeah.
still have under 1 acre non-conforming parcels, and you are going to, as you layer these things over top of each other for decades.
It's just, yeah, it makes it, simplifies it for the long term.
And people live in houses for a long time,
Yeah.
passed from generation to generation. That would reduce it, we just made it the straight 60 feet, because in what we have now, you would just eliminate number 1, and you would eliminate most of number 2, and you just have 60 feet.
Yeah.
Actually, you just have A.
mhm,
We've all taken a commitment to try to reduce rather than increase, and I think that's partly why you hear us when we talk about it, we're like, if we're gonna put something in, we gotta take 2 things out, or we have to, in this case, we'll get the,
I've actually read this thing 4 times, the whole manual, at least 4 times over the years, since people don't read those. Well, people like Steve do, and
people who need them,
and people, like you that are in here.
if I can't sleep at night, I start at the
Oh,
beginning.
me too.
That should be like
Me too.
pen under my
Yeah, I think you got
chin.
your next,
That's
planning
exciting.
commission member.
Yeah, we have applications right here. I have them available.
What are the applications?
For here. For planning commission, or zoning board of appeals, or board of review.
I've done all this kind of stuff in a different setting.
You know, one day a month. It's kind of like the National Guard. It's easier. All right, well, that takes us, I think we've come to consensus on that one, everybody?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's fine.
That's, okay. Well, thank you.
Don't clap yet, because it has to still go to what, public?
yeah.
Has to go through several things for you guys.
Draft amendment.
We have to do
The
a
draft
draft.
amendment in the hearing, and then it has to go to the regular board.
The public hearing, please show for that. That will be, again, one of those things where we see all the particulars of the people that are gonna come in for the, well, what about my situation? And we'll hear all of that. And the thing is, that's generally what we hear in the lake settings is, wow,
Can't wait.
So we appreciate
No one
it.
came in for unduly obscured though.
Hey, yeah,
so-
they're all hooting and hollering, and we did it, and
Yeah.
nobody was here, so.
Nobody showed
Do
up.
you have an idea of how long this might take as far as for us to get an architect out? And we didn't want to do that and spend the money if it's not,
If we, at our meeting,
Have the draft,
have the draft, we would need to approve,
push it to a
push
public
it
hearing.
to public hearing, and then it would then from there go to the board.
Right.
Yeah, so it comes to the regular
like
board
3
in
meetings?
April.
3 months.
2 for us and 1 for the board.
so you're talking 3 months.
Possibly, yeah. It's short term.
Their meeting is some,
Okay, 3 months if it goes,
their meeting,
if it goes
the
fast.
board meeting's 2 weeks after us,
It's the
right?
first Monday,
Second.
second Monday.
Right, so it's 2.5 months.
Yeah, 2.5 months.
Yeah, 'cause I think, because you're thinking I would, it's pretty easy, I could just take this out,
Right,
put it in the amended ordinance. I could amend the proposed ordinance 2201 and add it
Oh,
in
for
there.
next, for.
Oh, the one you're
next
looking at,
Monday?
this one? Yeah, for next
Yeah.
week?
So it'll be Monday, then you gotta wait public hearing the following month,
Yep.
Yes.
and then you got
and
2
then
weeks after that.
2 weeks after that for the board, so
So that'd be-
Yeah.
like March, I think it could go even March.
So it'd be just
February
under-
hearing, March approval.
Yeah,
So it could come in just under 2 months,
right.
like 7 weeks. That'd be good.
Lumber prices might be down.
Yeah, we'll hold your breath on that one. You're not gonna make it to the car.
If you can do anything to raise the lake levels, that would be helpful. So-
Oh, yeah, that's,
So I can try to get a fewer complaints in spring.
You could also, instead of me adding an amended draft, you could also include in the motion to approve inserting a section, I believe.
So just verbally,
Yeah, just verbally, as long as it's in the motion,
they would
specifying.
probably want it written.
But it might, yeah, I think that'd be the better idea, yeah.
Type out a script, one of us will say it.
Nick loves to read.
Takes me to go somewhere, right?
Or the draft. Okay.
All right, what else we got here?
All right, let's move, we'll kind of go reverse order now, we'll go to shipping
You guys know.
container homes.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
I actually enjoyed this.
See, that's why you got that application here all day. I try to just keep them in reserve even if we don't have a spot open right now. You know, just know which people are interested in it. You know, I mean, just between here and the zoning board of appeals, 4 city members, we have 12. Plus the board of reviews down there, so there's another 3. And technically, we have 2 alternatives on the zoning board of appeals. So that adds up to, whatever that adds up to, 17 people. Someone's always changing here.
Thanks again.
Thank you. All right, to the shipping container homes.
I just brought this back, just wanted to clarify. Or just- Yeah, real quick. Jeff emailed Val at Dalton Township, and he said they don't have any ordinances for shipping container homes. I wouldn't prohibit a shipping container home. I just wanted to get your perspective on whether or not the ban on shipping containers as accessory buildings prohibited them from being used as homes. Just to make sure I wasn't allowing something that was specifically prohibited.
Are they prohibited everywhere in the township for accessory buildings?
I don't believe so. I think
Aren't
in
they allowed in
Bill's email,
commercial?
he said that they're allowed in commercial with planning commission approval. I would think that if it's a shipping container home, would fall more as a prefabricated modular home, and it's been altered to the extent where it's no longer a shipping container. And it's also meeting the engineering and building code requirements. So,
When you have a business with lots of buildings, what's their principal building and what are accessories? How do you determine that?
it would be where most of the business is conducted. I'd say it's their main business. That's actually a good question.
Well, because we always think that at the campground,
But
like,
it's,
our height restrictions, are they principal buildings or are they accessory buildings? Because,
Yes.
well, the accessory buildings are buildings subservient to the principal
Which one's
building.
needed?
And then let's see what the definition of principal building is.
What about the principal accessory buildings?
Right.
The shed.
It's not in
my
designation.
car.
I don't see a designation of a principal building, but principal use is the primary or predominant use of any lot or parcel. So I think it'd be the primary predominant building on the parcel.
Okay, what if you're a campground?
Hey, every person has to go through the check-in place, so.
I think at this point it'd be.
We all have to go to the bathroom too. I mean, those are two separate buildings. See?
Yeah, you want to.
Well, because,
It's fairly obvious what a house, what the principal building is.
right,
But I think
it's just businesses that get muddled.
with a business, it would be on their site plan review, whichever one they. on
We
their
don't
site
say
plan review,
first because.
Say, whichever one they said was, when they came to us, said, this is our primary building.
Good, we didn't say anything. So, we're in resource conservation. We can't have a shipping container as an accessory building?
I guess not.
I wanna change that.
And you also,
What's wrong with shipping
It kind of-
containers?
I think some people didn't like how they looked, because it was added in a couple years ago.
Before they became cool.
But I've seen it where people.
We wanna
fish
make a
in
teen
containers.
hangout, like Xbox and like all kinds
Oh.
of things, like, you know, give the teens somewhere to go.
I
Right
thought
now,
you were
they hide in the
talking about
woods,
the,
so.
Is it unruly, you just shut it and drag them away?
Yes, exactly.
No
Well, at that
Just-
point,
We just wanted to do something cool, but I guess we'll just stick build it, never mind.
well, at that point, you would have to alter it to a point it's no longer
Yeah,
just
if
a
it
shipping
were-
container.
If it
Well,
were
yes, of course, you have to alter it.
remodel,
Yeah.
alter.
Okay. So
You
you're
would need a
just,
site plan review anyway,
yeah,
so that would be something that the planning commission would have to make a determination. Yes, is a shipping container, no, it's not a shipping
okay.
container. And I think the intent of the ordinance is just people just having shipping containers being plopped down on their
Mhm.
property and throwing stuff in them and leaving them there to rust.
Right, okay.
The ones that are dropped off that says, you know, company name on the side, and then, you know, the shipping container number, and
Right.
rusty on one side, hinges falling off on the other.
Costco.
I mean, see, you want some semblance of control. I think that was the fear, but there's plenty of them out there.
Shipping company. Paint it, cut some holes in it, spruce it up.
So we're good to not do anything on this. It's not prohibited for a home or anything right now?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
good.
then
Let's
later,
do nothing.
that would be a later conversation if you'd
So,
like to allow.
Your
shipping
conversation,
containers.
that would be something that you could add into our, one of our work sessions to say, do we need it as a band, or could we increase its availability to people?
That was easy.
Drainage.
All right.
Yes. So Dalton Township has an interesting ordinance for this. They actually they regulate the number of cubic yards and make permits for, you have to get a permit for alterations to the topography over a certain number of cubic yards.
ordinance was put in because of my father-in-law. Clear cut a parcel and it made people really mad.
Yeah, I actually had the zoning administrator call me and tell me that people are taking, she suspected people were taking dirt into Dalton Township. And I told her, well, we don't have any limits on dirt you can take in.
There's people that do bring sand in and dump it on their beaches.
They always have
That
an
would be,
EQ permit for that.
Yeah, that would be an Eagle permit.
It's an individual permit.
I don't think so. I don't think they do, but,
Well, I know they don't, but you're supposed to.
That would, yeah,
Oh,
you're supposed to
yeah.
get it.
yeah.
Yeah, I've heard a few people
I don't
turning
think
each other
the
in like that.
DNR doesn't like that at all.
And then they go in when the water is whatever they don't like, then they dump a bunch in, and when the water goes out the way, then they scoop a bunch out.
They do, yeah, they pull it back, yeah.
Yeah, this 308 section A just reeks. I can't believe, I mean, it's not your business. If your parcel next to you wants to clear cut it, why is it any of your business?
Yeah.
You know, this is, so right at the Agard and Whitehall Road, you know that parcel there, that used to be wonderfully wooded.
Oh, yeah.
And my father-in-law had clear cut. He didn't want those, I don't know why, and everyone was uproar. The people that live on Williamson or whatever can now see through to Whitehall Road. It was very ugly.
Oh, it's all topsoil on there, wasn't it?
Well, no, it was fully wooded. It
Well,
was
it's fully
like,
wooded, and then he scraped all the topsoil on it.
yes,
Next to the industrial park?
Yes.
That corner?
Yes, that corner.
Okay.
and so then townships at the time started, we're gonna make, I'm surprised Dalton doesn't have an ordinance already for this, but clearly Laketon Township was like, we're not gonna let you do that unless you,
Isn't that Dalton Township?
that area is Dalton
Yeah.
Township. That's why I'm surprised Dalton never did anything, because everybody was mad about it.
No one's brought up clear cutting. I was gonna allow a company to come in and cut some of the township owned land for wood and sell it on. So, but they didn't make it a second appointment with me, they're supposed to.
So I developed some sample wording based on, not based on Laketon Township.
Good.
I included that because
You're a
that
little
was
nosy.
I included that as an FYI, this is what, an extreme that we could go to. But I like the way that it's worded in the property maintenance code.
Is that the landscape and natural features shall be preserved insofar as practical by
No.
removing? That's not,
But that's part of the example wording.
Okay.
Subsection 1 was added based on the storm drainage section 507. And that's what the building inspector currently enforces.
And the reason this came up is because of two neighbors. And the one neighbor had brought in, had flooding in his basement, house burned down. And he brought in a bunch of fill sand to raise the house up so he wouldn't have flooding in his basement. But now the other neighbors are getting a bunch of the water that he's shedding from his property. And normally the building inspector would largely deal with the building itself of the house and not so much necessarily having the changing of the landscape would normally be done in zoning, but we don't have anything specifically in place for it. And so now the neighbor is arguing that her site was flooded because, to a greater extent, because of him shedding all of his water. So you get into an issue of damaging someone else's property here, and it's odd to enforce through the building codes because you're dealing with topography rather than the building structure itself.
Yeah.
So, which we're dealing with it. Neither one of the neighbors are happy, and that will probably continue as such.
Yeah, keep your water on your own damn lot.
Yes, you do.
Real clear, how do we write that in a way that's clear?
Right, which is very clear, like when you're doing commercial and you have to do a site plan.
Yes, yes.
You have to take care of your own water.
Mhm.
And essentially, we need something saying that, which he included this section 507 for storm drainage, and referenced that in the example wording that he has here of keeping it there. And the way Steve wrote this up is he's saying alterations to topography as well. But the main part that would address this is the drainage of stormwater must not be changed or altered in such a way that the drainage of stormwater creates a public nuisance. So, and in the case we're talking about between the neighbors, one of the neighbors is directly next to them, the other neighbor is across the street, so a ton of the water is going across the dirt road into the neighbor's lot. And the road commission could technically do something there if they want to, but the road commission also doesn't want to do anything with it. Their response would be to close the road. I think it's too bad. Let's put up some cones and, right.
What's the address? Remember?
It's 6th Street over by Dawson. I can't remember the specific address.
6th and Adams.
Yeah, 6th and Adams. 6 is a little tiny road, and I talked to the road commission about ditching, doing something like that as well. And because, I don't know what the thing is, but they didn't make it a full width of a road. But to add in ditching, you're eating into people's yards very close to the houses, which gets weird with setbacks. So the road commission also doesn't want to actually add ditching there to handle some of the water problems.
Speaking of addresses, does anybody have the address of those couple of us here tonight? One to Google Earth.
6722.
Yes, I have.
Mueller.
What was it?
6722 Mueller.
Say it again.
With an M.
And Mueller.
Mueller.
Thank you. 722.
6722. 6722.
Thank you.
Shoot, that's the reason why I didn't buy a house over there on 6th and Adams. The one right on the corner that abuts the Twin Lake, there was like a red barn there. So I looked at that house, but there was like 3 feet of water in.
Yes.
This is 10 years ago, I think I looked at that.
Yeah, it's already a high water area.
Yeah, I don't know, I think like the well pump or something was even underwater underneath there, like. Sweet, kind of cool house, I mean, like it's a cool, cool farmhouse, got a nice wraparound porch and stuff, and needs some work, because the one part of the, must have been an addition or something, but definitely not level anymore. You can roll a ball, or you can set a ball down, and it'll roll. But cool kind of area, you know, would have been a cool little spot, but not that kind of water.
And if it was just one thing, then we could just handle the one messy incident.
Yeah.
But because that whole area, and there's still like a little subdivision, if you go a little ways south of that, I think there's still lawsuits from a couple of years ago over some of the building regulations that they had with the homeowners association and some of the flooding and stuff like that. And so if you can just build your property so that you just shed all of the water that falls on your land to the land around you, then it might become popular to do. If we push it far enough, we can push it into Cedar Creek, just put out all the water over there.
And push it to the lakes.
And then fill the lakes back up. It'd be great.
I almost would like 17.6D. I would almost like us to put something like that into it. This is talking about, of course, site plan approval and stuff, but it talks about stormwater detention or retention and drainage systems shall be designed so that the removal of surface waters will not adversely affect the subject property, adjacent or nearby properties, or public stormwater drainage systems. Instead of just saying a nuisance.
Essentially copy the commercial into the
Kind
residential.
of, because this is basically saying control your water on your own property, which is what should be for everybody. You gotta deal with your own water, you can't just make it someone else's problem. Then it doesn't say, I'm not sure if public
Yeah.
nuisance is too broad.
It's important, with the residential, maybe more than any other, because, everybody's on well and septic, and you don't want someone's beautiful fertilized lawn draining onto your water well area.
I'm just trying to help water it.
What section was that?
17.6 on D.
That would make sense, just copy over the commercial essentially.
That is well written.
Done in an unduly secure
Your neighbor's water cannot be unduly obscured.
One person's public nuisance is somebody else's dream come true.
Exactly. Benefit will inure to one party or the other.
I know you love that word.
Perfect. Here we come, Lost.
Well, we got all the problems solved, though. Good job, Casey.
Good, what's going on?
Put a round nail out.
All right, well, kind of looking at our agenda for tonight, I think that brings us to our favorite part.
What did we did we discuss this clearing of the land? I don't, maybe we can adjourn, but what did we do with that?
We haven't specifically brought up any clearing of the land. It was essentially it was in a sample ordinance that Steve had included, and then Casey specifically.
Let's
Which
set
I
it
did
on
not-
fire when we leave here.
I did not put a mark by that.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I will
Second.
All right,
Oh.
go ahead, you may support. All those in favor?
Aye.
One thing else.
Do well in this.
These
Is
are
that
late
what's
things.
wrong?
No, well, I have welded, but, well, this is from, I don't know, this is just, this is
That
a
obviously-
bus bus